Good afternoon, Det 842. I am joined here today with Brigadier General retired Guy Walsh. Guy Walsh has quite the decorated career. 31 years of service with the Air Force, correct?
That is correct.
He has flown the A-10, the RF-4C, the F-4D, the F-4E, the YF-4E, the T-38, and the C-130J.
That is correct.
That's a lot of flying. 4,200 flight hours?
About that, yeah.
How was that all 30 years? How long did that take to get 4,200 hours?
So for the flying time, I had the opportunity to fly right up from 1979 when I went through pilot training, right up until July 4th, 2010, my last mission in Afghanistan.
Awesome.
So it took me a while to do that. So.
That's a lot of flying. Well, I really appreciate that you took the time out of your schedule to sit with us and answer some questions today. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you've done with CYBERCOM? Because I know that wasn't as prevalent in your history from what I was reading.
So yeah, the CYBERCOM piece actually came after I took off the uniform, for the most part. So began in 2010. I had actually just come back from Afghanistan. And it was the opportunity there. I had numerous jobs with U.S. Cyber Command. So at that time, U.S. Cyber Command had just stood up.
Yeah.
When I deployed to Afghanistan in 2009, it had not been stood up yet, and I was given an opportunity to go through, at that time, the National Security Agency, just to have a good feel of understanding the missions and what they were doing over in the theater where I was about to head to. And so when I came back, the opportunity again to work at U.S. Cyber Command, my first position was actually with the J3, so the Operations Division. And in all honesty, it wasn't as much learning cyber. It was much more taking those skill sets and tradecraft that I had the opportunity to develop on the air side and apply those to cyber operations.
Okay.
So that's essentially what what we did. So a couple examples. My primary mission over there in flying was in the A-10 in Afghanistan. One of the tools that we use is called the 9-line, right?
Yep.
So that's clear, concise communications between the aircraft and the ground commander and the JTAC to be able to deliver ordnance and create effects on the ground. So that's what that was all about. So we took what was a airplane 9-line, so we did that, and we had a medevac 9-line because we had a combat search and rescue mission. But we took that process and we said, let's apply that to cyber. So what did we develop? A cyber 9-line, right? Because the same thing. Let's develop some real clear, concise communications to be able to do that, to deliver cyber effects, right? And so that was the first part of what we did. So that was the cyber 9-line is a great example. We worked under what was called the air tasking order, right? It was a 72-hour cycle. So what was developed later was the cyber tasking order, right? And the cyber tasking cycle, which isn't 72 hours. Obviously, it's going to be a lot shorter than that. So those were some of the first things we did in the J3 operations, just to develop what I'll say is take known, proven tool sets, capabilities, and processes, and let's apply those to these. And remember, this is before there were cyber teams.
Right.
There were no cyber mission teams yet. It was just everybody cyber, and we just all do it together. And so that was part of it. Right. The second part, then I left the J3 and went and worked for the deputy commander on higher strategic type level projects. The first project that we did what was called building the first Tier 1 exercise for cyber, and that became known as Cyber Flag. The Cyber Flag, and if you're familiar with the term red flag,
yes.
So since the 1970s, Moody Suter developed the place where we would fly our first 10 combat missions. Most people don't know that I believe we lost about 10,000 aircraft in Vietnam. So we had a lot of lessons to be learned, whether that be rotary wing or fixed wing. We had a lot of lessons to be learned. And so the Air Force developed this program to say, let's fly our first 10 combat missions in, at this time, the Nellis Air Force Base ranges. Right? So we had to change that kill ratio and what our ratio was for losing airplanes. So how do we both survive and defeat a specific adversary? So in the Air Force, we built, or in the aircraft, we built that with the aggressor squadrons, where my son actually happens to be flying right now.
Awesome.
But we have aggressor squadrons, and they assimilate specific tactics, adversarial tactics, whether that be People's Republic of China, whether that be North Korea, whether that be Russian tactics, right? So that was what we did in the airplanes. Well, guess what? Same thing with cyber.
Same thing with cyber.
Now we take that and we call the we called the cyber flag the away game. This is our best cyber operators, offensive and defensive cyber operators, going against those same tactics of Russian People's Republic of China tactics, and that's what we built the program about. Okay. And we actually, the first year we did that, we did it at Nellis Air Force Base. We actually did what I will call a cut and paste, and we kept all of the same hours. We kept the same 4-hour vol periods. Yeah. We did all those, but we applied it. Instead of stepping out to an F-15, an F-16, an F-22, we stepped over to the computer.
Keyboard, yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what we did. We stepped over to the keyboard. We did it all in those same rooms, and we followed that process. Because, again, it was that learning. Now, again, we developed that, and the cyber operators took it and ran with it and made it much better. But that first year, that's all we did. Cut and paste, called it a vol period, did all those type of things there, the same. The next thing we did was simply develop what was called the Cyber Guard program, which is the home game. Okay, so this is where instead of just our operators going against their operators, military to military, conflict to conflict type of thing, let's look at what happens if there's a nation-state actor that, let's just say, says we don't want to meet the F-35 and the Stryker vehicles, and we don't want to meet the Navy Zumwalt in the South China Sea, right? We don't want to do that, so we would rather interrupt what's happening at home, taking out power grids, taking out cities, taking out critical infrastructure, those type of things. Obviously, in open source, there have been nation-state actors that have said this will be part of our strategy. So we knew that the exercise that we called Cyber Guard was going to have to include working with our critical infrastructure owners, working with energy folks, working with transportation, working with our other federal partners, DHS, FBI, and others. Yeah. And so the Cyber Guard exercise became exactly that. How do we take the Department of Defense pieces of that, now the Cyber Mission Force, and how do we integrate them to work closely for that Homeland Defense piece of that? So those are, and again, those are a couple examples of the last job that I had to do, or was given the opportunity to do with Cyber Command, was to stand up what was called their Capabilities Development Group. And this is the idea of how do we look forward into the acquisition world, and how do we get, I'll say similar to MFP 11, but like the special forces have, where you have acquisition authority, where you're able to establish requirements, those type pieces there. So that was a big piece. And then finally, in all honesty, and I've gone on here a bit, but I was asked to help lead what was called the Academic Engagement Network. How does U.S. Cyber Command engage with academia, with universities, which is obviously how I sort of ended up in this position, which is a continuation of my final one of my final tasks there at U.S. Cyber Command. Awesome. Very simply, if you're going into the cyber world, the opportunity to work there at the headquarters and work and see that firsthand at Fort Meade is just amazing. So I'd tell everybody it's a dream job.
I look forward to the opportunity myself. What do you think? Like, how did you go from flying aircraft to then working in cyber? What was there a spark? Was there just somebody asked you to do something? What happened there?
Yeah, so the spark was, I think I shared with this, on the 4th of July 2010, I flew my last flight. So I was done flying with the Air Force. 4th of July, Helmand Valley, supporting U.S. Marines, British Special Forces. There's probably no better way to end your... But it was the end of the flying clear. So I had to find something else to do. So came out of Afghanistan in about August of that year, of 2010. And at that time, I was looking for a job. So it wasn't, it wasn't anything magic. But what I will tell you, and again, important for the folks for Det 842, or from anybody who's coming in as a brand new, coming out of ROTC or as lieutenant, it was all about the networks and people I'd worked with prior to that. So two of the folks that I had the opportunity to work with over my career, one of those was at that time General Keith Alexander. General Alexander and I worked together down at U.S. Central Command when I was the Chief of Air Operations and he was the Chief of Intel.
Okay.
We sat together 5 days a week on targeting boards. We worked those type of things. And so that was when we were both at CENTCOM together. Another person who I had the great opportunity and privilege to work with was a gentleman by the name of Chris Inglis. When I was the wing commander for the Maryland Air National Guard, Chris was one of our airlift group commanders.
Okay.
And for those not familiar with those two names, General Keith Alexander went on to become the director of the National Security Agency, and he was there in 2010 when I got hired, and the first commander of U.S. Cyber Command. Chris Inglis was the deputy director of the National Security Agency.
Okay.
In addition, so he was a guardsman flying C-130s, and at the same time, his other job, he had led Signals Intelligence Division, but now he was the deputy commander. So when I came back and said, hey, I need a job, what is it I can do? I was given the opportunity to go in and talk with both General Alexander and with Chris Inglis. And the bottom line on that is I walked into the office and they said, hey, we're standing up this thing called U.S. Cyber Command. Would you like to join us? And my initial response was, I know nothing about cyber. But General Alexander looked me in the eye and very simply he said, your job is not to learn cyber. Your job is to teach people to be warfighters, to plan and to be able to execute as a team. And so that was what my job was to do. I learned a little bit about cyber on the way, but it was really about taking very recent combat experience and combat planning experience and putting that to the test, but bringing that and I'll be straightforward. It was a culture of folks who were always told they were the support role, right? So how do we change the culture and say you're no longer the support, you are the front line. As a cyber operator, you are the front line warfighter. And oh, by the way, it's not going to be you by yourself on a keyboard. It's going to be a team that understands how to work together. Call it a 4-ship, call it an 8-ship, but the same concepts that we had done. And so that's that's why I was given the opportunity to go to Cyber Command, because I needed a job.
So I have one question I really want to make sure, because my old coworkers at the 333rd who are still there teaching had a question, and it's, do you think there are clear definitions of what defensive cyber operations are and what offensive cyber operations are? And do you think those definitions are being adhered to or followed, or do you think that there maybe is some blurred lines between the two?
Yeah, so if we're talking first lexicons are important. You know, how we define words.
Yes.
So that becomes the first thing. I do believe that, again, having worked with the Cybercom and Stratcom teams, that I think they spent a lot of time to define offensive operations, cyber operations, persistent engagement. A lot of those terms, I do think, are relatively as well defined as you can get them. Having said that, the idea of defining it in a lexicon and being able to execute and do those type of things. Remember, the DoD and U.S. Cyber Command and Stratcom are not the only ones who get to try to define what words mean, right? And the challenge, and I'll just take social media or politicians or the political landscape that we have, everything's a cyber attack. Right? And so just defining what is a cyber attack, defining what's offensive or defensive. We always gave analogies of, if someone breaks into your home and is attacking you and your family, and you pull out a gun and shoot them, is that an offensive thing? You pulled a gun and you shot somebody,
no, it's
right?
Self-defense.
So it depends on that. What is the system? What is that environment that this is happening in? Right. So there's a whole different piece there in terms of how well you can define something and how well you do that. So I'd simply say I do believe that the DoD has done a really good job at trying to build that lexicon. But remember, we're not the only ones who build definitions in lexicon. And so given that, I think we're close with the lexicon. I think it's when you're trying to execute and do a operational event or planning, and now it's a little bit tougher, and there's a lot more gray areas in terms of how we operate and what we do. And there's a whole piece of that in terms of operating in gray zones and operating in red zones,
Right.
and where those lines are and where those lines can be blurred.
Gotcha.
Don't get me wrong, it's an iterative process. We will continuously have
Yes.
to look at redefining or where we define something, but we found an exception that it didn't work for. Remember, most of our policies, guidelines, and even our lexicons
Yeah.
are written for day-to-day operations to do
Right.
that. But you're always going to have an exception where that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I remind people, policy and guidelines are exactly that. They're guidelines.
Right. And
But in
technology
some
is
cases,
changing every single day.
It absolutely does.
By a vast amount, too, not just a little bit. So those definitions would have to be redrawn every time technology changes.
But I do think, to your point, I think we've done a really good job of giving someone that starting point, the bookends of where to work in between. But obviously those bookends aren't as solid as we want on those edges, and you're going to see those shift back and forth.
Gotcha. So with there being a bunch of research and theories and all of this, strategic plans, are there any strategic plans to enhance and train cyber capabilities within the DoD?
So let me break out the two words you just gave. So you said strategic plans. I think are there strategy, and then are there implementation plans?
Yes.
And what I would offer is, again, this is a great opportunity. Most of the new strategies are brand new.
Right.
So the fact is that the smartest people who are going to be doing this are going to be people who are brand new lieutenants, because their brain isn't, and I say brand new lieutenants, brand new airmen, brand new soldiers, whatever that is. But because their brains aren't going to be cluttered by, here's what the old strategy was,
Right.
here's what the old policy was, and those type of things. And so what I'd recommend, number one, is just within the last 30 days, you had a brand new national cyber strategy come out. I would encourage folks to read that. Okay, so you had a brand new cyber workforce strategy come out from Deputy Secretary of Defense Hicks, right? I would encourage people to read that type piece there. Because again, this is telling you what the strategy is going to do, but when you get a strategy, somebody's got to implement that.
Right.
It says, here's what we want to do, here's our goals, here's our focus areas, here's our themes. But the next step is, okay, how do we do that? Right? So how do we actually execute that? Those aren't even out yet. So again, and I say they aren't, to my knowledge, they're not out yet, because typically when you release something, and you don't want to do an implementation plan before you say the strategy. Here's what we want to do. Well, here's how we're already doing it. So I think part of it is, over the next several months, there'll probably even be opportunities to provide input into what those strategies are for, workforce development, for education, for the training. So I would highly encourage it, and you can probably in the blog here put the links for the National Cyber Strategy, for the workforce, the cyber workforce strategy, and as these come out, so will the implementation plans for each of these. So how you implement. So I break up those two words rather than saying a strategic plan.
Right.
Strategy and implementation plans, and then we go from there. So. And again, the fact that they're brand new, I will tell you that this is a great opportunity for our younger part of the force.
Yes.
Because now it's like, hey, you need a new implementation plan. Let me tell you how to do that.
Yeah.
Telling that to the E7, E8, E9, or to the 05, 06.
Yeah.
But I encourage that, because again, that's what we need. If we've got new strategy, you need new thought to do it, not the same folks who, I developed the last one, let's just do it the same way.
Yeah,
right?
'cause that doesn't get you anywhere. Same spot you were last time.
There you go.
So I want to talk a little bit about retention. I know that right now the Air Force, actually the entire DoD, is struggling with recruitment. There's a huge decrease in the amount of troops that America has right now, and specifically with cyber, it's, I think, felt probably the hardest as far as retention goes. So do you think that, first I want to say, are there any efforts that you've seen, I know it's been a while, are there any efforts to incentivize recruits to maybe go towards cyber? And then do you think any of those incentives are working, or do you have any suggestions to make those incentives better?
I always have ideas. So let me So you mentioned retention, but then you also talked about recruiting. So let me,
Right.
and I'd have to go back and look at it again. I initially read some of the cyber workforce strategy, and remember, recruiting's like the last part of that, right?
Okay.
So it's identifying who are the right people to recruit.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is recruiting them. Number two is training them, and then retaining them.
Right.
So that those are the four type pieces there. So let me start at the front part. I think right now, and I'm only familiar with this because our university had developed the identification process for identifying who the most likely candidates are that will succeed in passing pilot training.
Okay.
So we built, using artificial intelligence, but we built algorithms to be able to develop a process for the Air Force to identify. So that's the identify. Who are those folks that, if I can get them into pilot training, they're going to graduate. They're going to graduate and be at the top of their class. So we built those. What are those characteristics that we want to look for?
Mm-hmm.
I believe the intent was at that time to do something similar on the cyber side. I don't know where we are with execution and the identify type piece there. The recruiting, what I would tell you is that there are a lot of pretty cool tools being developed on the industry side.
Yeah.
Because the industry is fighting for these exact same people.
True.
Right? And so what I would offer is, I don't know that the DoD has to develop those tools, because we partner with most of these same people that we compete with for these for the players, right?
Yeah.
We partner with the cybersecurity companies. So
Yep.
we're partnering with the Palo Altos. We're partnering with the service providers, the cloud providers. We partner with all of them. And a lot of the tools for how we actually are able to recruit and do things there is important. Retention, again, I would offer that until we have a little bit more stability within the U.S. political system right now, that's going to be tough either way.
Yeah.
So as we bring stability to that over time, I think that the recruiting will plus up. And part of this is the same argument that when you were recruited, when you came into the service initially, is the idea that you're going to get to do some stuff that nobody else gets to do on the outside.
It's been really cool.
So yeah, I mean, that's it, right? So we know that is a key recruiting tool. We don't want to stop that.
Yeah.
Right? And so the opportunity for what we have there. And so that's absolutely tremendous. So I don't think we spend enough time using the capabilities and the values that we already have out there on those type pieces there. I'd also say two things on the retention side. One is, we'll never compete fully on the economic side. So the
Yeah.
value in terms of competing against a Google and
Yeah.
the public sector is not going to happen. But what we also see is a bunch of the folks that we have, number one is that they make a decision to stay in Guard or reserves.
Yeah.
Because exactly that. They like the cool stuff. They like the teamwork. They like that. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't heard anybody that says, oh no, we have a much better teamwork team at SpaceX or at Google or at Amazon.
No.
They stay on the Guard, and this is the same with pilots, to be honest with you. The pilots do the same thing. Is yep, I'm flying for Delta and Southwest, but I really love coming to the Guard and doing that because of that type piece there.
Yeah,
So
it's a second family.
yeah, so that's part of the key there in terms of what I'll say, that sustainment. The other thing I will tell you that I think is a huge benefactor in the old days when somebody didn't finish 20 years, they sort of got pushed to the side and they were treated like crap and they were told you're a quitter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was it, right? Today we have the Skill Bridge program.
That's true.
The Department of Defense is looking at our folks that are getting out and saying, hey, let us help you to convert and transition. Building that relationship, now when that person crosses over to the other side,
Yeah.
they're a value added. They're going to be recruiting to say, hey, look what I got to do in the military, and guess what? They helped me get this job.
Yeah.
That's a determining factor. So I think looking at the skill bridge factor, that's an investment by the Department of Defense. And I think that's an important investment, and it's making a difference. I think there is good for having turnover
Yeah.
and having folks depart that, have certain skill sets and those type of things. But the decision to maintain those relationships, I think, is a huge win for the DoD.
Okay. So from flying planes to working with CYBERCOM, and now you're with UTSA. How did we get here?
So again, this was one of those opportunities that My last role with Cyber Command was helping to establish its academic outreach program. As I was looking to say, what is that next transition? I was having little success with my surfing career and my rock guitar career. Although they're still on the forefront, they're still something I plan on doing. But I was real interested in just the engagements with universities and watching that next upcoming group of folks, the research aspect of it. To be honest with you, the first interviews I did were with Texas A&M with our former Chief of Staff of the Air Force, Mark Walsh, who gave me a shout. But then when I got the call to come to UTSA, the ability to be in Military City, USA, where you have the largest group, a lot of the exact same folks I was working with at Fort Meade, we're now here at 16th Air Force, previously 24th, 25th Air Force. So still supporting and working with Army North, working with all of the folks from the federal type pieces there, but being in a university environment with the next generations that are going to be the leaders, and working with 842nd and the next generations of leaders for the Air Force. It was just one of those things that was too good to be true. And again, for those who haven't been to San Antonio, it's a big little city. It may be the 7th largest city in the U.S., but it's a small town. And it literally is a small town here. So that opportunity to work in there, work in research with an R1 university. So UTSA, there's about 3,800 colleges in the U.S., 146 of those are top-tier research universities. UTSA is one of those. UTSA is a minority-serving institution, and it's just as much. It's not just about being a Hispanic thriving institution. It's about the fact that we probably have more females graduating in the STEM career fields. We have about 46% of our faculty are female. So if you look at, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, the cyber operator career field, the last numbers I saw, 96+% male.
Unfortunately.
All right? And that's not even close to the balance. No. So here's where we're going to provide the solutions to that workforce, the diversity of the workforce. And that's what differentiates us from a lot of the other universities. So given the opportunity, again, the city of San Antonio, Military City, USA, a minority-serving R1 institution that is looking at you can see that this would be a big part of the solutions to what we're looking at, whether it be workforce or national security. So easy decision for me. And the weather doesn't hurt either.
So for some of the folks that might not understand, we're in the building, the National Security Collaboration Center. Could you give them maybe like a quick overview? How did it get stood up? What the purpose is? Maybe some of the goals and the vision for this building?
Yeah, so the building's called the San Pedro 1 building. And it houses both the School of Data Science. So we're one of 6 schools of data science in the U.S. If you go to a school of data science at any other university, you will find that you will have some classes over in the computer science building. You'll have some with the cybersecurity in the College of Business. You may have some in the College of Engineering, and you'll bounce all over there. This is the first of the schools of data science that is centrally located. So if you're going to come here, and right now our programs are master's and PhD, so it's graduate. In the fall, I believe we start some of our undergraduate. So that's a very unique aspect. So David Monjo came to us as the director of the School of Data Science, 25 plus years in industry with Bell Labs and some others, Ohio State University School of Data Science. He stood up the University of Cal Berkeley's School of Data Science, established it there, and he's here now. So working closely with David is absolutely a huge opportunity that we have. What differentiates, I'll say, San Pedro 1, the floor we're on right now, the 4th floor, is primarily our industry partner area. So the NSCC has about 80 plus partners from industry, from government, across the board. And so having our students, having our faculty exposed and working, doing internships and research on applied for what they're doing in the classroom of fundamental sciences in 5G, in cybersecurity, in artificial intelligence, in data science, and giving them the opportunity to do these things and working with our partners on applied is something that, again, that we've created within the San Pedro 1 facility. So that's a big piece of what the facility is able to do. On the 5th floor, that's primarily of our government partners. And so we have Army Research Lab, we have Air Force Research Lab, we have Department of Homeland Security. We have several national labs that are embedded here working with us. And so, again, the gold standard for research supporting national security are our national labs, right? And our FFRDCs, our MITRE Corporation, again, a huge federally funded research center that is one of our biggest partners, right? So when you have the opportunity to work with them on research projects, on education, on training, and those type of things, that is something that I would say is relatively unique to the building here as well. So,
one last question before we cut out for today. Do you see maybe any collaboration with this building or any of the entities here and our detachment with our cadet cyber organization or with I-5? Think there might be any possibility that we might be able to work with each other and maybe get students over here to just kind of see what else is happening at UTSA?
Yeah, absolutely. So Colonel Hoffman, working with Colonel Hoffman, working with also Colonel Ball. I've had the opportunity to do a couple just lectures, like leadership type things with the ROTC, with Det 842 in this case. And I think that we need to. The only challenge right now is geography, right? You guys are 17 miles up the road.
Yeah.
But certainly the opportunity to work closer and get our 842 folks involved in some of the projects that we have out here, and I'm happy to drive up there to make those happen. Okay. I mean, in all honesty, that's part of it. And I'll start with one example. So when we talked about the building, what's magical about the building? So I just was downstairs. We have a restaurant downstairs called the Eatery. Yep. Sitting down there, I'm having lunch with our Dean of Science, Dr. David Silva, and we're sitting there eating lunch, and we bump into someone at the next table. It happens to be Mayor Ron Nirenberg, and we start talking to him about, hey, we're getting ready to do the university wants to help support a cyber exercise for the city of San Antonio.
Okay.
Right. So these are things that the best thing to do. My first thing when and as you walked into my office, I'm sending out a note back to Dr. Greg White and the team here to say, hey, we need to get back on the mayor's schedule because we're going to do this. I look forward to hearing how you're going to tell me how we get our students, our ROTC folks, and our faculty engaged in this exercise.
That's really awesome.
So I mean that is part of the magic. But yes, I would love to, and I think there's going to be certain opportunities that will benefit both our students and the staff over at the 842nd, and in the long run, our Air Force. So.
Right. Well, thank you for tuning in again. This was the Det 842 podcast. Join us next time.